Well, hey, Dave Melenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you this week. I got a tough question for you again and again. Man, I find this stuff and I'm like, I think I know the answer. And then I start thinking about it. I'm like, dude, you don't know what you're talking about. So I'm like, all right, find the person and then let's just get them on and let them unpack this. So the question really is right here. What thinking trap is limiting your performance? And I'm like, thinking trap, I got to say, I never heard those words together. So I'm like, what the heck is that? Right. So then I'm like, that's it. I'm going to find this person. So I'm honored to be hanging out with Elizabeth Lewis. How are you today?
I am doing wonderful. How are you doing, Dave?
I'm well. I'm super excited to unpack this for us. So thank you for jumping on today. You are president of E. Lewis International Consulting. So tell me what's going on at E. Lewis International Consulting these days.
Yes. So I work with high performers, kind of like a holistic doctor would, right? So I take in mind, body, spirit. We're looking at it all. And it's all about optimizing performance, efficiency, and effectiveness, really honing in that champion identity and making sure that you're living as the champion. Because most high performers want to be that champion and reach high odds. So that's what we do. We have a 99.6% success rate, which is so cool. So I'm very
Nice.
effective at it. And it's great. And by the way, call me Liz, because I also go by that.
Perfect. Well, so for the 0.4% of you that are listening, wow, that's crazy. 99.6% success rate. That's killer. So, and also you're a podcast host for your podcast called The Liz Show. So if anyone's interested in checking that out, make sure you listen to us first, because she's going to tell you a bunch of cool stuff today, and then you can jump in and check out The Liz Show. So thanks again for jumping on. The other cool part was you have a master's of science in positive psychology. And I'm like, what in the world? I've heard of psychology, but I didn't know if you're just making up words and putting stuff in to make it sound good, or if that's really a major. So what's the difference between psychology and positive psychology in that spot, Liz?
Absolutely. And I have to say really quickly, my first master's is from Life University. So when then people see Life University, they really think that I'm just a bunch of, hot air, because they're like, oh, so you went to the College of Life, right? And I'm like, no, it's a literal college. I'm not lying. It's one of the top chiropractic schools. But
Nice.
positive psychology has been in the works really since before World War I. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to see it, Martin Seligman, I say his last name wrong all the time, so please forgive me. He became the father of positive psychology. But you see this with Dale Carnegie. You see this with Napoleon Hill. You see some of the same attributes. But the biggest difference is positive psychology focuses and emphasizes on what's going right in your world.
Okay. Gotcha.
So, recap, and after the soldiers came home from World War I with shock cell syndrome, psychology actually shifted to what's going right in your life, to focusing on what's going wrong in your life.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
that's what shifted the history. So then psychology became more about diagnosing and fixing what was quote unquote wrong with you. But if we're being honest, it's not effective to do that approach.
Sure. Okay. Wow. Well, and I think I like what I like about this topic to start with is it kind of like what thinking trap is limiting your performance. I like the fact that it's kind of on me,
Yeah.
because I think we have this. I mean, I don't know if you're in agreement. I see so many people that want to blame everybody else for their problems, right? The government, the customer, the competitor, the industry, the weather. I mean, they got all these things, right? And it takes such power away from us. And it makes me stand there and go, well, what can I possibly do if all these outside influences are having all this negative effect on me? So, I mean, I'm assuming that we as human beings have a lot of control over what we're about to talk about. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, blame is a thinking trap, believe it or not. And it can actually indicate a lot of I like to kind of see your mind as a mental garden. And what I do with my clients is I find all of their roots, all the weeds that are growing in, and we pull the
Sure.
roots. Weeds destroy gardens. And it can, blaming everyone is also telling me that you probably struggle with bitterness, a critical heart, you're name calling. So you have a lot of condemnation, and you've got fear of man. So you got codependency. And so, yeah, because what you're saying is I've got a victim mindset and nothing's really my fault and it's everyone else's.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's start with that question is what thinking trap is limiting your performance? So for us that have never heard thinking trap and me with a third grade education, what does that mean to the average entrepreneur business owner that's listening right now?
Absolutely. And I love how you're like third grade education here. So I'll make it really simple because you're right. And it is actually very simple. So if you take at a high level in the indication that 95% of our thoughts are the same every single day,
Okay.
1 to 99% of those thoughts can be negative. On average, it's 80%. So we're thinking on 3 levels. We have automatic thinking, we have intermediate thoughts, and we have core beliefs, right? We're going to spend most of our time in those automatic thoughts, right? Very quick, knee-jerk reactions. What thinking traps are your negative automatic thinking patterns. They're the ones that immediately come in. Like someone who struggles with perfectionism is going to have all or nothing thinking. And if they don't have all or nothing or black and white thinking, they might have should statements, right? I should do this. I need to do this. I ought to do this. I must do this, right? And so it really cultivates more suffering and oppression in your world because you're living by these, or you're falling into these traps that are just making your life more difficult, like blame, right? If you're going to blame everyone for why you're not growing, well, then don't get too frustrated when you don't grow.
Okay. So how would you put this? How would this manifest itself in a typical, 20-person company, 10 million annual sales, something like that? Is this where the owner limits their growth? Is this where each individual kind of limits other people's involvement? I mean, give us some real world thinking traps if you can in that day-to-day activity.
Absolutely. So when you think about being a leader, right, leaders have to coach people. If you're struggling with someone who is procrastinating on their work, right, they're going to struggle with perfectionism. So they're going to have lots of rigid rules or all enough nothing thinking, right? And so they're going to be less expansive on how they approach their work. Another example would be, let's say you have a boss who's just really critical, high strung, just bruh, and he does what's called discounting the positives, meaning he allows that one, all the employees in the meeting, they did everything right. 99% of it's right, but 1% of it was wrong. And so he is going to only fixate on that 1%. He's going to magnify it, which would be another thinking trap, blowing it out of proportion and allowing it to ultimately ruin the culture and the psychological safety within the environment. Another example is like, let's say you're, out at a dinner, a networking dinner, right? You got to wine and dine these people.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a life thing, not really a work thing.
Sure.
You get your food and it's undercooked. I mean, it's just like everyone else got their great meal, but your meal, it's ruined, right? They're going to have to remake it. Now you all of a sudden go from being really like positive and happy and excited. So like, screw you. This is horrible. I'm pissed off. I'm angry, right? That's called mental filter, where you allow one bad thing to just ruin everything. And that's going to also change how, especially if they're new people that you're trying to wine and dine, it's going to change how people perceive you.
Wow. So, man, quit doing that. Quit living my life here. You're digging too deep here. I want to go backwards once though. So, for the people that see 99% good and they see the 1% bad, and then they kind of hone in on that 1% bad.
Yeah.
I could see the kickback being, well, I want them to improve. I want to work on that 1%. I guess I get that. I think and my question is what's missing acknowledging and praising the 99%?
Absolutely.
So that it's a lot easier to work on that 1%?
Absolutely, 100%. And the other thing too is extrinsic motivation doesn't actually do anything but get a person over the hump, right?
Got it.
And so part of discounting the positives in your example is if you're trying to control your employees and get them more intrinsically motivated, then you're going to have to spend more time getting to know them, which means you have to create more of that acknowledgement on the positives and what they're doing well. Now, like as an employee, the way this would show up is like, my boss wanted me to do this entire list and I did all of it but one. So, I suck. And this is where you'd also be putting labeling onto yourself too. I'm not good enough. I can't do this. And so then that internal self-talk is going to hinder you from performing because you're wasting your bandwidth on unnecessary dialogues that is not going to promote you forward, but really take you backwards and hinder your self-esteem and self-confidence and ultimately your integrity.
Sure. Is that hard to untalk yourself? That person that did so much good focuses on the bad and be like, I suck. So is it hard for that person to unlearn this stuff?
That's such a general question to kind of compute over how different humans are, right? Like we're the
Sure.
same, but we're different. So
Yep.
it really depends on the personality. It depends on the desire to want to move forward, right? Like, it's like
Okay.
the age old saying, you can't help someone who doesn't want help.
Right.
Right. So if they don't want help, if they don't want to change, then yeah, it's impossible to get them to shift in that. But if they do want to change, then it's actually easier than some might realize to shift it, right? What I found for at least high performers or analytical thinkers is they need to really understand the why. The psychoeducation really starts to help them understand stuff. For people who are more creative or prefer more ambiguity or more just kind of go with the flow type of people, sometimes they just need to know the other way of doing things. And then if you kind of give them, if you will, the formula, they'll follow suit. But at the end of the day, what you're looking at a high level is healing the breach in relationship with themselves, right? Like they don't trust
Sure.
themselves, they don't like themselves. When you speak poorly about yourself, you are rejecting yourself, you are not accepting yourself. And so it's healing that breach at a high level.
So you bring up something that I just thought of that really makes me wonder, because I get questions a lot from business owners that ask that exact question of, I have somebody on my team that doesn't want to get fixed. They don't want to change. They're not open to any correction. They're not open to any training. I mean, is there hope for those people, or are those the people that we really should look at? Sorry for the word should. Are those people that we would be better off getting off that team quickly? If they're really determined to not want to change, I'm not open, I'm closing myself off to anything that you're going to share with me. What's the solution to that person? I get that question a lot and I don't know the answer.
There's two ways realistically you can go about it. I mean, what we're talking about is a selective achiever. Nobody really wants a selective achiever in their company, right? We want the overly ambitious, do anything to get to where you want to go. So there's one of two options. One, you can spend some time coaching them in a motivational interviewing framework, right? Because what you have to do with such individuals is figure out what does motivate them. What do they want? What does interest them, right? And then you can connect the external bonuses that they would get in the company or whatever additional thing you could give them as extrinsic motivation. You could connect that to their intrinsic motivation.
Okay.
Now, if they're just like, no, I'm here to just collect a paycheck and I don't really see how any of this could help me achieve my personal goals or spend time with family, or if the company is unwilling to allow them to have a 4-day work week versus a 5-day work week, then at the end of the day, sometimes the best thing you can do is just say, wish you well.
Yeah. Okay.
No.
And that feels so permanent. That feels so like I'm just, here's my white flag, right? But there are times where us as business owners, the fit's not there. The person's not fixable, at least with the tools that I have. Do you just share with people? Just tell them to move on? I mean, is it that simple sometimes?
I mean, it is. And kind of what you said there at the very beginning is a little bit of codependency, right? Like you can't control another person's emotions. If you're not really giving up, employees and obviously a business owner, they are supposed to protect the company. That is kind of the agreement at the end of the day. If you're unwilling to protect the company, if you're unwilling to do your job, if you're unwilling and you're not doing it well, right? Like if they're doing it well,
right,
and then sometimes it's worth maybe restructuring your hierarchy or hiring somebody else to kind of carry the bandwidth. I mean, this is where it's not really a binary 1 + 1 = 2 type of situation. But then you have to have that tough call. I like to encourage people, like, have 3 conversations before you kick them out, right? Like give them options, but you have to be honest. You have to say like, Bob, if you're really unwilling to hit these demands, then I'm going to have to put you on a PIP. And if you're not willing to change, then understand we're going to have to let you go. And it's not because we want to, it's because you're not really giving us a choice. So this is where you have all the power. You make the best decision for you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think you bring up a great point about what motivates people. Now, we do a lot of work with DISC, and in that assessment, there is a page based on how they answer the questions that gives them a list of things to choose from that their personality would tend to be motivated by. And I was just working on somebody prior to this call where we were in that motivation list, and they found a couple that were really powerful for them.
Oh my
It
God.
tends to be a hard question,
Yeah.
right? To say, okay, Liz, really, what motivates you? Because it's like, I almost am like, what is he looking for here? You kind of start to pre-think the strategy out, right? I mean, I had one guy that I said, what motivates you? I forgot his name. And he said his one word was his mortgage. And I'm just like, man, if your whole life is determined by one sheet of paper, and what are you going to do when eventually that mortgage is paid off, right? I mean, some people don't know how to answer that. I'm just curious, do you find people struggle to learn what really motivates them?
No, because I don't ask it that bluntly.
Gotcha.
And to know the guy for the mortgage, security motivates them. That's what
Gotcha.
motivates them, right? Um,
Perfect.
to your point, asking someone what motivates you, people don't really know themselves but so well, because a lot of people don't spend the time, unless you're a psychologist, a lot of people don't spend the time to do this interpersonal work, and
Yeah.
you're exploring. So directly asking what motivates you, and if they already know their ass is on the line, they're probably
Yeah.
going to give you more BS answers, and also, like, I use the DISC in my profession too. I use the original, the temperament.
Yeah.
um, but that gives you such a high view of a person that sometimes it's over general at the end of the day,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
And so one of the better ways to ask this is twofold, right? For selective achievers, what do you do on your day off? What are your hobbies?
Yep.
If you had all the time in the world, what would you be doing? Right? Because I want
Sure.
to know what they're doing, and then from that we can
Yeah.
calculate it, right? Like, oh, I
Yep.
spend every second with my family. Great. So you value family time. Or, man, I really like to volunteer. Great, altruism, right? Okay,
Yep.
so we
Yep.
can build on those values.
Sure.
Now, if someone's just like, because unfortunately there are those people, because some people aren't, it's not that they're not motivated, it's just they've got so much fear.
Sure.
And they, like, you've really got to help them get the fear out of the way for them to be prefrontal human beings versus limbic
Right.
system human beings.
Yep.
But another great question is the miracle question. If you went to sleep, if you went to sleep tonight, and while you were sleeping, a miracle happened. And so you woke up and your life is perfect. Everything you imagined, everything you wanted and more, you got it. What would be the indicators that this miracle had happened? They're going to tell you something.
Gotcha. Sure.
So now you can kind of get an idea of what would motivate them, right? And
Yeah.
this is where I really believe motivational interviewing is what all leaders need to know, because it's one of the most effective ways to get people changing, because really what we're asking is behavioral change, and there's 6
Yep.
steps to change, right? And if they've never thought about changing, then we're in pre-contemplation. We're not even contemplating. And so now the power is getting them to talk, so that they
Right.
hear themselves and they hear their own change talk, and then you just sit there and you let them do it all for you.
Sure. Wow, that's so cool. Well, and what you said just made me think of the 4 stages of readiness that they talk a lot about with Dr. Phil. I don't know if that's who originated it, right? But it made really a lot of sense where people change. Sometimes they change because they have to, they're told to by a spouse, the authorities, whatever. That's at the low end. The high end of change is I'm emotionally and mentally and physically and spiritually ready to make that change.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool that you get to make that determination. But if you don't understand the motivation of yourself, I think that really challenges that whole thing. And like you said, people don't know themselves. We do a lot of work with EQ. There's a lot of non-self-aware people in this world, right? And if you don't believe me, go on the freeway and try and, just merge in front of somebody. Put on your blinker and just see how long it takes before someone lets you in, right? It's crazy. But I think that when you say that leaders need to understand motivation a little bit more, Liz, what does that mean? Because I think a couple people just like, oh my gosh, I want to learn more about that. So what does that mean?
Well, you have to learn, you have to know the framework to create change, right? Motivation and what motivates them, really what we're looking for is how to change them. You know, what's the carrot we can dangle in front of them? Now, we know extrinsic motivation doesn't last. More money, eventually it's going to normalize. So that doesn't usually last. But getting to know your employees holistically, like personally and professionally, is going to increase the odds, because then you can start to really cater to what they want. You scratch my back, I scratch your back, right?
Sure.
And I understand not all organizations have the ability to do this. So you have to do it within your framework. But
Yeah.
again, you know, the big picture for at least motivational interviewing MI, which is a therapy technique, is getting them to realize, do they want to change? And if they do, how do they go about it, right? Because it's kind of the age-old philosophy of give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime. And
Sure.
you know, if you've ever dealt with a teenager or a 2-year-old, people don't like to be told what to do. They are going to be more resistant. So when you know what motivates a person, you can start to tear down the walls of resistance. And they can start to become more open-minded, and they can start to see things different, right? Because, you know, circling back to the thinking traps, I mean, some people just naturally are going to have knee-jerk reactions to change. It could
Yeah.
be because of trauma, 9 times out of 10, that's what it's a result of.
Okay.
But it could have been other things, right? And so then they can fall into a tunnel vision, which means they're like fixating on another person's behaviors or the expectations of what they see, but they're not seeing fully. And so
Yeah.
part of learning how to create that motivation is getting them to just think expansively, like take the pressure off, take the frameworks off. You know, what would you really want to be doing if you had all the time and all the money in the world? And then
Wow.
can the company fit that into their benefits package?
Sure. Yeah, isn't it funny? Most people that think their team wants $1 more an hour, just gives them $1 more an hour and it doesn't change anything. They'd rather have a half day off a month or whatever, right? Everybody's kind of motivated by different things. So we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to ask you when we come back is, what do you do on your day off? So I'll give you a minute to kind of think that through, and we'll be right back. Awesome. All right. So I gave you the commercial break. Now the world is waiting, Liz, to know, what do you do on your day off?
This might be like an incorrect answer in the sense of
Wait a minute. How can there be a wrong answer here? How does that work?
I'll say it this way.
Okay.
A lot of people believe in work-life balance. I don't believe balance exists. I believe harmony exists.
Okay.
I love what I do for a living.
Sure.
Absolutely love it. To me, it's not work. It's every day I get to go play. So
Okay.
I love learning. Love learning. So on a day off, I'm reading a book, I'm taking a course, I'm continuing to work on my company. I'm really athletic, love sports. So I play a lot of golf, I work out, I do walks, I'm just active. Of course, I hang out with friends and family. I'm more of that like 4 quarters type of person. I would rather have small, intricate, and I have a puppy and he's like my everything. So I like to hang out with that little, he's actually under my desk right now. I have a big office chair so he could sit with me. So that's what I do. I like learning and
Cool.
being active.
That's awesome. And it's funny because there are people that love to learn, and then there are people that don't. I mean, again, in the assessments, you can kind of pick that up a little bit, and you can say, like, how many books have you read in the last 6 months, right? To some people, and they know exact, and other people are like, I haven't done that since high school, right? So, there's no right or wrong to any of these, but I think it's so powerful. Like you said, the more leaders get to know and understand their team, the more successful that they can create a good environment for them. The culture can hopefully align with their thoughts there. So, thanks for sharing that. I want to circle all the way back though to your thought process, because I saw you say, it says right on your LinkedIn message, it says, message me to become a tough-minded optimist. So as we started this, we were talking about the psychology that focuses on what's going right versus the psychology that focuses on what's going wrong.
Right.
So for somebody listening that doesn't have the desire to be that learner like you do, are there some simple things that we can do to help us kind of change that thinking from, I'm an eternal half empty person, I'd really like to find a way to be a half full person? Are there any simple things that you can share with us that we can at least start that journey?
Absolutely. At a very high level, the biggest difference with optimism and pessimism is your self-talk. Pessimists are going to see things in impermanency and feel helpless. Optimists are going to see things temporary and it's not their fault. There's a little bit of like, Andrew Newberg is a brilliant neuroscientist, neurotheologist, and he has created a list of like 8 things that's really great for your brain health. One of them is being ridiculously optimistic, like being overly optimistic and self-confident is really good for your brain. And so the biggest thing is pay attention to your self-talk. We all run into problems. Optimists see a problem as an opportunity, right? Failure, opportunity. There is no winning or losing. There's only learning and growing. A pessimist is going to just crumble because it's like, oh, well, I failed. I can't do anything. I'm helpless. I'm horrible. This didn't work out. I'm going to stay here forever. Well, your life changes. I'm sure you haven't stayed in the same place for the rest of your life. So start being more objective with your thinking and less subjective with your thinking as well, right? Those are the dangers of those thinking traps, are highly subjective. The other thing is being proactive. Like, what could you do, right? And because pessimists are going to try to control the outcome, optimists are going to try to implement their effort. So just right there is a big shift. So are you really helpless? Is this really going to last forever? Is there something that you can do? Is this really as bad as you think? I mean, the worst situations can birth the most powerful changes. I mean, we saw that with Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah, that's interesting. And that's one of the questions. So in an EQ assessment, talking about emotional intelligence, they bring up one of the ways that you can build your emotional intelligence is by asking that question. What's the worst thing that could happen right now? Right? I mean, it's amazing to me how it's so easy to flip me off on in my car because I'm trying to get that 25 feet of space in front of you. In a zipper merge, it's every other car, right? It's super easy. It's not that hard. But for individuals there, you're not getting that 25 feet, right? And so then I start getting a little bubbly, getting a little irritated. And then I have to say, dude, seriously, you just lost 25 feet. Like, is it worth flooring your car and ramming this guy or whatever your response is? So they try to look at that piece as, like you said, what's the worst that can happen? And boy, that just seems to really settle people and bring them back to kind of a more peaceful spot. So there are other things that people can do to try to drop that down a tad.
Absolutely. And your example, it teed me up perfectly for it. So thank you. So one thing that goes a little deeper than what's worst case scenario is why does this bother me?
Yeah.
Right. And this is where you have to start to take control of your own emotions, right? Yep. And usually it has to do to your childhood and unresolved crap back then. Like, unfortunately, it is slightly true. But if you think about it, like, there's things that bother other people, but don't bother you because you don't give it the meaning that that person gives it, and everything's meaning. But at the end of the day, when somebody makes you angry or makes you want to have rage, no one made you do it. You chose that emotion. Why did you choose that emotion? Like, if you come to me, Dave, and said, Liz, I'm your enemy. I hate you. I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to destroy you. I'd look at you and say, all right, Dave, well, you're not my enemy. Love you. Want the best for you. If I don't come into agreement with whatever you're trying to get me to bite, you are powerless over me.
Yep, exactly.
And so it's learning how to keep your power and really investigating, like, okay, my spouse just said that to me and I snapped at her or him.
Yeah.
What is going on inside of me to want to snap, right? And this is, again, learning your emotions and how they manifest. And unfortunately, we should really learn this in preschool, but we don't.
Absolutely. Well, and so from a guy's perspective, I say it completely different. I say, hey, if I'm sitting with a guy, my buddy at the bar, and I say something stupid to the guy and he comes off and cracks me in the face, if I don't hit him back, it's highly unlikely that he's going to keep on beating me up, right? And so that's where I feel like, yeah, you know what? What's your response to that? It's like, you probably deserved it. You said something stupid, you deserve it, you get smacked and you kind of move on with your life. But I think it's interesting because pessimism and optimism are really words everybody uses every day, right? We have that. And do people really say I'm a pessimist, or do most people really think that they're an optimist and it just happens to be a huge blind spot for them?
I mean, I feel like that's more of an experiential situation. I mean, I work with a lot of clients and have consultations when clients are coming to me, they're very, very honest. They don't act like they're an optimist if
Yeah.
they're
Okay.
not. What I have found is some people say they're an optimist when they're an idealist. And
Okay.
those two things are very different at the end of the day. But I've personally never had someone say that they were optimistic when they were pessimistic, but I also specialize in linguistics. So I mean, I can tell what you are by the words you use. It's not really
Great.
rocket
You should have told me that before, because now I'm using all these aggression words with you. So I'm really not that aggressive, but I totally get it now. So awesome. Yeah, I'm talking about car accidents. I'm talking about bar fights. I mean, so I totally get it. But I think that if you take time to think about it, the research that I've done, which is none compared to you, it seems like the brain naturally is more of a negative start. So we're kind of starting off from a negative spot. Is that accurate?
Well, that's fairly overgeneralizing, which is a thinking trap too. But you wouldn't be wrong. So I'll say it this way: negativity is more stimulating for the brain than positivity. For
Okay.
every one negativity, you need to find 3 to 5 positives if you want to shift your brain through neuroplasticity, right? Now, with
Okay.
that being said, there's, let's use DISC, right? Eyes, or in my world, sanguines, Tiggers, are going to
Okay.
naturally be more optimistic. And then there's within the eyes, you're going to have different personalities that are going to be more truly optimistic or more idealistic, right? They're going to kind of think that they're optimistic, but they're really idealistic. And then
Sure.
part of this is your lived experience as a child, right? Because that can shape and mold you. If you've only experienced neglect and abuse and you've been victimized, let's just say it that way a lot, then you're probably going to be more pessimistic than optimistic. Now, ironically, while it's natural or easier for us to have negativity, we're wired for love. Love and optimism are connected, because when you're optimistic, you trust, right? So there's a connection, a direct connection between optimism and trust, high trust. If you're
Sure.
pessimistic, you don't trust people, right? And so it correlates through. And so when you're optimistic, you just get so much more done, because number one, fear is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And number
Wow.
two, it's a lot of, like, I don't allow anger and venting and all that crap in my sessions, because you know what you don't like. You
Yeah.
know that's natural for you. That's
Sure.
easy to
Sure.
identify. There's no benefit. There's none whatsoever. And negativity can actually cause irreparable damage to the brain, not
Hmm.
just for the speaker, but also for the listeners. So I really like my brain. We speak only positivity, not like, I gotta be careful, because some people are like toxic positivity. And I want to be like, was a pessimist the one who described this? Like,
Yeah,
I would rather
exactly.
you be toxically positive.
Yep.
It just means you got high hope than being
Right.
negative. Now, I would say if someone comes to me and they say they're a realist, I'm like, no, you're a pessimist.
Sure. Okay.
Don't believe in the realism and the optimism. I believe in, your optimism and because optimism is saying you have a confident and hope-filled perspective. That means you have to believe it's going to happen before you see it.
Oh my gosh, we need sessions together, Liz. This is hitting way too close to home for me. I was able to think about a word as we start to land today. Thinking about that extra 25 feet. Why do you need that 25 feet in front of that car? The word that came to my mind was because I'm so competitive.
Okay.
Right. I need to beat you. I need to win. I need to get where, and again, I have to work through this, and I have to practice letting them go. I mean, if somebody puts their blinker on and wants to go in front of me, that's different. But the guy that refuses, or girl that refuses to let me in, now it's like a competition. So now I got to find a way around all this other traffic to beat wherever. I mean, there's no real finish line. There's no real prize. It's all right up in my head. So, I totally get that. So, so poster child right here for somebody that thinks sometimes before they act on a competition side. I appreciate the openness there. I just want to ask a couple more questions. I'm gonna let you go. What would your tip of the day be for somebody listening? Maybe it's something that we covered. Maybe it's just something on your heart that's jumping in right now. But what would your tip of the day be for somebody listening?
You know what, Dave? You keep teeing me up. You keep teeing me up. So your example of like, oh, I want to like compete, right?
Yeah.
I would say my biggest tip is learn how to practice acceptance. And what I really mean by that is learn how to focus on what's in your control. And
Okay.
anything outside of your control is not worth your attention or your bandwidth. You can't control if somebody's going to use their blinker or not. right?
Yep.
That's you getting upset at your next door neighbor for planting a rose bush.
Yep.
You don't have any authority over there. Why waste your bandwidth, right? And when you can learn how to control what's in your control, oh, you get so much more bandwidth, so much more peace, so much more freedom, right? And within that, then you can start to really label at a granular level what's going on, right? Like sometimes, not saying this is for you, but sometimes competition, being overly competitive, can mean that you tie your worth to achievements or that you're struggling with some sort of greed, right? And so it's taking all of that and saying, okay, I've got this toxicity in me, so I'm going to put it to the side because I don't want that gremlin to shine for me, right? I want to be, I mean, I think, and maybe you would agree, I think positivity and optimism and, you know, good character feels way better than being an a-hole, right? Like,
Oh, absolutely, for sure.
totally. I mean, I'm type A too, so I've totally had my moments of where road rage once got the best of me, and then finally I said, no, this is not worth losing my peace over. So
Yeah.
whatever. I'm not going to give the power, because really what you're doing, if you think about it, is you're opening up your house, like your physical house, and you're getting a megaphone or going and picking up people and saying, rob my house.
Right.
Just take what you want, right? No.
And then get mad at them when they do it, right? You know?
Exactly. When it's like you had the control the entire time. So my biggest tip is really learn how to practice radical acceptance, which means being open to your emotions, your thoughts, your feelings as they are without trying to change them to be what would be more ideal, right? Because we're really talking about control issues. And so learning how to just control yourself, focus on what's in your control, because this is how like codependency now stems out of it. And like all these other fixed mindsets start to come out, and it's just not worth watering them.
Wow. Well, and that's hopefully that's resonated with somebody listening as much as it resonated with me. So thank you so much for sharing that. And, you know, I try to say every week for the people listening, you know, rather than jump into your next activity, rather than push, you know, the pause button, you know, I would like you to just kind of sit with this for a little bit, because there's so much here. And the coolest part is we control a lot of this. If that control word doesn't freak you out, we're in charge of this, whatever the word is. We are the facilitator of this stuff. Yeah. And I think that's what's so powerful, is not to have to worry about what's the economy going to do, what's the next president going to do, what's this, what's that. It's not about that. I mean, sure, that can affect your business. It does also affect your mind. Yeah. And I feel like that's what's so powerful here, is these thinking traps are limiting your performance. Absolutely. So if you want to learn more, definitely reach out to Liz. And if somebody does want to get into a deeper discussion with you, Liz, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Absolutely. You can go right to my website, ElizabethLewis, LOUIS.com. And there are some links to work with me there. You can email me at Elizabeth@ElizabethLewis.com. And also on my website, I have that quiz, What Thinking Trap is Limiting Your Performance. It's free. You can take it. It takes 5 minutes or less. And it will score you on all 17 of the most common thinking traps. And it gives you like a 20-page breakdown of what it actually is.
Now you did it to me. You're going to make me do that. Darn it. Oh, man. I was hoping there wasn't a free
anything.
I was hoping we'd sneak through without you saying there's this way to get Dave. You have these thinking trap issues. Just go ahead and fess up, right? But some of them we don't even know, but that's the thing. They're blind spots in our life. And that's why I think these are so powerful, these assessments, to be able to help us with that. So if we go to ElizabethLewis.com, there's a spot there for us to be able to access that assessment.
Absolutely. It's under freebies, or you can go to ElizabethLewis.com/thinking trap quiz.
Okay. Awesome. So I'm going to do that. You're going to see it come through. If there's a bunch of them, don't call me and be like, dude, we got problems.
No. Well, first off, you're not a problem. Second off, it's not like that. It's more just an opportunity to grow. I mean, we have Toastmasters and speaking clubs for a reason, because we aren't aware of what we say.
This is the thinking trap group. So, so awesome. Well, thank you again so much for in all that you're doing in this. I love the positive psychology. Now I know what to call it when I'm thinking about it. So thank you for that. And thanks for all you're doing, and can't wait to keep learning from you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for letting me be on this show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.